Shalom, hello. My name is Reb Zalman Schachter-Shalomi. This is the second part of an 8-part symposium on Judaism. So what does it mean to experience revelation? Revelation must be a communication in which the Creator condenses and beams infinite, multidimensional cosmic truths to enter finite minds. This communication breaks through not only once, Sinai is also now. As we stand in tension with the texts of our tradition, we open ourselves to the insights and intuitions which are the echoes that daily issue from that Sinai. As Professor Heschel, great mystic and prophet, once put it, the Torah, revelation, is an answer. We must each time recover the questions. How are we to use this gift of life, this opportunity to be harmonious with the intent of the Creator? How are we to be with one another once we know deep down that we are all one in God? The answer is partly contained in the question. Even to ask the right questions is part of revelation. We will think about these things to evaluate our answer.
I'm not totally certain that we can know what happened at Mount Sinai. What we could know is what people told us happened at Mount Sinai, the whole tradition of Mount Sinai. And the tradition of Mount Sinai says that at Mount Sinai, the Jews entered into a covenant and were given, so to speak, in return, or as part of that covenant, a very unique way of life.
We Jews have been always argued that one of the great points about Judaism was that there was a moment in history when something very, very cataclysmic was happening, which involved the exodus from Egypt and the revelation of Mount Sinai. In other words, it was not something that was, shall we say, a sudden revelation that Moses had. It was something that happened to a mass of people. That was the Jewish position. And the law was communicated, even if it was only the 10 Commandments, and after that expanded by the Bible itself says that after the first 2 commandments and this great encounter between God and the Jewish people, they said, we've had enough. We can't take this bombastic revelation. Moses, you bring it to us. You bring even the last 8 commandments after the first 2. You bring it to us. This is mentioned in the book of Deuteronomy.
And I think that purposely the language of the revelation at Sinai, with the kolot ubrakim, with the lightning and the thunder and the smoke and the mist, is a metaphorical language to show that nobody knows what happened. I don't believe that Moses received every word of the Torah and he was a fancy secretary and took down the entire Torah, including the last verses. I believe that that's a beautiful myth. I believe it's a sacred myth. And when I say myth, that doesn't mean that objective truth is closer to truth than myth. I mean, I think we have to understand what sacred myth is. Sacred myth has to do with that internalization of certain basic human truths and in the human divine encounter which is incorporated in the people, that forms that people's language, that forms that people's tradition. The sacred myths of our Bible, of our Tanakh, have informed the Jewish personality, have given us our values. But that doesn't mean that if I describe you objectively and I tell you how much you weigh and what color your eyes are, that's subjective truth as far as there can be anything objective, and how much calcium you have in your body, how much oxygen you have, and how much hydrogen, and what's the content, and that's your description. The real Jonathan is not the objective chemical description of Jonathan. The real description of Jonathan is how you impact human beings and what you mean to yourself.
I think that what we talk about again is the template, the Ten Commandments. The process was put in place which led to a kingdom of priests and a holy people, which ultimately brought the Torah to the world. So it's a process. It began, I think Sinai began a process which led to the Torah. I as not, you may want to talk to an Orthodox person, I have a different opinion, and I respect that opinion. And if you're only asking me personally, I can't, at least at the present time, accept the fact that historical documents, later time, were all handed there complete with punctuation.
Before the Ten Commandments, there were no laws that say do not murder. There were laws that say if you murder, this is the punishment. If you steal, this is the punishment. If you commit adultery with another man's wife, this is the punishment. That is, they said it was illegal. They didn't say it was wrong. The insight of the Ten Commandments is that for the first time that we found in human history, people were told not just that this is against the law, but that it's wrong.
I don't know what happened at Sinai. I think something happened at Sinai that created a people. I don't know that the voice came from heaven. I don't know, and I sort of don't care. I mean, I care archaeologically. I think it's very interesting. I love archaeology, and I love what they dig up. But there's a larger truth, and the larger truth is the truth of a tradition that has continued on based on this belief for 5,000 years, and will continue. And that's the truth that I think is the important one. I think something happened at Sinai, something happened that a people were created. Something mystical, perhaps, something that made this band of whatever slaves gel into something. Perhaps it was Moses as a charismatic leader. I don't know. But once, whatever it is that happened, and a tradition continued to build and build and build on that, it almost doesn't matter, in my opinion, what the truth with a capital T or a small t is. It's the truth of the existence of this people and of the history of this people that I think is what counts. It's what our tradition is about now, and what we want to continue.
To my mind, it almost smacks with idolatry, with the Zorah. If you say, I don't care what God said, I care what the people did, or what tradition did. What gives the people in tradition authority? Other groups also have people in tradition. Tradition has value because we believe that the tradition reflects, maybe not exactly, reflects what got the original point. That's why Sinai is so centrifugal, is so much in the center, because all our lives we're trying to duplicate, try to recreate that moment of experience. So Sinai, what happened in Sinai, the God revelation, is the making or breaking. If there was no Sinai, then there's no religion. And if there was a tradition, so what?
The strangest thing in the world is that half of humanity believes that Sinai really happened. It's just too few Jews. But the Muslims and the Christians both have accepted. Going out of Egypt, standing on Mount Sinai, God speaking to Moses, Moses a prophet, and it's true. Now, that's the only reason to do anything. If it's a lie, you shouldn't be Jewish. If it's a lie, if there's no God, you shouldn't be religious. Forget it. Yeah? But if it's the truth, you understand, you should be Jewish, because you should be close to that Creator who made the whole universe and took us out of Egypt and spoke on Sinai.
Dr. Heschel, who was, I consider to be Abraham Joshua Heschel, by far the greatest religious Jewish thinker of the 20th century, said, what happened at Sinai we will never know. That something happened at Sinai that changed the course of human history, no one can deny.
Yes, but the revelation between what there was a God that was, if the word was starting, you believe that God was speaking to Moses and saying to him, you don't eat a pig, you don't have to eat pig. This is the question. This is the question when you believe in God.
If we say that this object is kosher, what does it mean it's kosher? Kosher means whether God says that you can eat it. If it's non-kosher, means God says that you cannot eat it. It's not a man-made law, it's a godly law. And the Rambam says that whoever doesn't believe that one word, not only the whole Torah, one word was not written by God, he's an Apikoros.
It's clear from modern scholarship that the whole Torah couldn't have been given at Sinai because we know we can trace the development of it in later generations, and there are even contradictions, shall we say, between the law codes and the Chumash. I would have an open mind as to whether Sinai really happened. What do I mean by that? I mean, clearly, the description that we have now is what Martin Buber calls saga. It's not history. It's a kind of poem celebrating the mighty acts of God, celebrating that God gave the Torah. So the thunder and lightning and all the other things, they may have happened, but the record that we have of them is much later.
There was a revelation of God. It happened at Mount Sinai. And there were 600,000 men there, and an equal amount of women and a lot of children. There was a great revelation, and the God of Israel revealed himself after we went out of Egypt. And he gave us 613 commandments. And that I know is a fact because I heard it from my father. And my father heard it from his father. And that was given to us through generations. Now after that, there was the written Torah that God gave Moses, which is the Chumash. And then there was the oral Torah, which is the Gemara and everything else that comes with it. So I know when I open up a Chumash, I know this is the word of God. Because I heard that from my father, and he heard it from his father. So I know that to be a fact.
There is a certain sense in this claim. What is claimed here, that something which goes through tradition as valid, and not only, well, let us say, it is not only a testimony which you remember, it is a living testimony. It is the fact that on every generation, people accepted it and were able to transmit it as a living fact. It happened for them. It happened for them not as a history. It happened for them as actual experience, as an actual evidence. So in this, if you understand it this way, yes, this claim that here you have the testimony of a tradition, the testimony of a people who lives by the evidence of this spiritual event, yes, I think that it has something in it.
So the Jewish people are very funny people. You know, it's 3 million people, 600,000 men between the age of 20 and 60, so at least 3 million people. If you came to the Jewish people today in front of 3 million people and said, you know, God came and said something to me yesterday, the Jewish people are by nature terribly skeptical. How could you sell them such a thing? How would there would be no dissenters? It would take 1,900, or rather, what am I talking, 2,900 years for somebody to say, oh, it didn't happen. What about that generation? Why did they believe it?
You have to understand what is claimed in it. I am not trying to accept literally what Yehuda Halevi said, or what every Orthodox Jew is saying in a childish, simplistic way. What I'm trying to tell you is this: if you are able to transmit this tradition by making the evidence of that event a lively, full of life for the people to whom you tell it, then it is an evidence. It is not only telling them, you know, this happened. What is important is to feel that in the Torah, in the actual presence of Torah, and in the actual presence of life, according to Torah, you have the presence of the event. If he can feel it, then you're convinced. If not, then you told a childish story.
When we talk about God inspiring someone or God giving the Torah, it's a very complicated and mysterious thing. I've often said that the traditional doctrine is the Torah is from heaven. But you have to, before accepting that doctrine, you have to know what do you mean by Torah, and what do you mean by heaven, and most of all, what do you mean by from? It didn't just drop down. It's I would put it this way, it's the interaction between the human and the divine. So this doesn't mean that, as some would have it, that the whole Torah was invented by human beings and there's no reason why we should, to put it crudely, why we should follow the opinions of old guys who lived in a different age. But it's the encounter, it's the result of the encounter between the divine and the human.
I will never know whether God gave the Torah at Sinai, and I will never know whether the Big Bang theory of creation is true. I will never know whether Darwin's theory of evolution is correct or Freud's theory of the unconscious. None of these is subject to the kind of verification that the scientific method allows us to use in simple physical phenomenon.
Science, and I hesitate to say this because people suspect science anyway, but science any more than any other human activity, well, somewhat, while science is more logical or is more disciplined than most human activities, it is has no more claim to an absolute dispassion than any other human endeavor. Scientists don't start from the ground up and can prove everything that they assert or they believe in or they accept. Rather, what they're able to do is explain enormous amount about the world in very economical terms, and in terms which are proven to be so useful that I would bet my life on it, right? And I bet my children's lives that science is right. And if someone else comes along with something else which is non-scientific, I would reject it in terms of the physical description of the world. I accept the scientific description of the physical world. At the same time, I understand that it's based on unprovable assumptions, a religion of its own, if you will. Science, after all, assumes that the simplest explanation is the correct one. Or at least science assumes that science progresses best by accepting the simplest answer, the most economical, elegant answer. Wer steht das geschrieben? Who knows that? Where does it say that? We just make that assumption. It's an unprovable assumption. I'm not saying this to attack science. I think science is a wonderful and important resource for our lives. But at the same time, the success of science, the fact that science has succeeded based on things which we know but can't prove, such as the fact that the laws of nature that work, or that the path to truth, the path to progress, is along the line of simplicity, gives us a demonstration that life, in fact, depends on things which or at least gives us reason to believe, extra reason to believe, that all of life can depend on things which we can't prove, but which we know. I do believe that the laws of chemistry govern every molecule in my body, but that I also believe that this body that I've been given allows me to discover other truths, like love and truth and justice and things like that, which are really outside of proof and outside of the physical world. Now, some people can put some physical boundaries around what this means. I mean, when I think I'm in love, some set of neurons in my head are clicking. That's my response to it, but that doesn't make love any less real and doesn't make it just a physical phenomenon. Just like justice exists or truth exists, and I really believe, for example, when a child's arm is burning, you see some horrible thing happening, a tortured human being, I believe something is wrong. It's not just chemistry. There's something evil about that, and that's outside. So the revelation comes through life. The revelation, in my case, some of the revelations, some of the things I've learned about love have come through becoming a father. Things about justice have come to me through having to escape from Germany in 1939. So my own personal experience has been, in some sense, a revelation. That is, I have learned things in my life which are outside of nature, supernatural, if you will, outside of physical nature. So I've learned about this greater world through my physical experiences. And I think in the same way, that's how I interpret the Jewish historical experience. That which the Jews, that which has been revealed to the Jews has been revealed to them, to us, through our shared experience. As slaves in Egypt, as lamenting the destruction of Jerusalem in our own time.
In my mind, the history of the Torah or the covenant is that there is a cycle. It starts with the divine initiative, and therefore Sinai is conceived of more as God simply speaking or God sending messages directly. As the cycle continues, though, we begin to discover God's messages not just as tape recorders, but as interpreters, as appliers, as, in the words of Rabbi Soloveitchik, as co-creators of the Torah. And just as God summons humans to perfect the world and become co-creators of the universe, it's our task to improve the genes so it doesn't cause sicknesses. It's our task to improve the earth so we can stop earthquakes or anticipate them. I mean, these are some of the tasks humans haven't finished yet. Just as we are co-creators of a perfect universe, I believe Rabbi Soloveitchik hints clearly that we are co-creators of Torah. We unfold and we create the divine revelation even as we receive it. So I would like to move away from the simpler understandings to a much richer, more complex understanding of Sinai.
So I believe that a revelation has, I don't know if it is on Mount Sinai, you know that Mount Sinai is a certain moment in history, but revelation was a whole process. It is a history. It is developing in history. It is still developing and evolving. So it happens, yes, it happens through the mediation of human experiences.